You're listening to HawkeTalk. I'm here today with Ben Gleib. How are you?
I am good, buddy. How are you?
I'm great. Glad to have you on. So I assume going back to the delivery room when you're born, you pop out, you start making fun of your mom, doing crowd work with the doctors. Like that's how it all started, right? Immediately you're in comedy and off to the races.
Pretty much. Doctor tried to slap me, and I was like, "Whoa, Will Smith, tone it down." And
Exactly.
had the delivery room in stitches, and from there it was an easy path.
There you go, in stitches, no pun intended. So, um, so to take me back, where are you from originally? Where did it start?
L.A., born and
You are
raised.
from LA. There you go. One of the rare few. Same here, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah. And so when you came into the world, like what was childhood like? What were your parents like? Like where did it all start?
I had a great childhood, great loving family. We also fought a lot. We were kind of like a loud arguing family, but we were one of those families that would make up immediately after
I'd
fights.
say, yeah.
So
What was it more of like the constructive arguing or was it like actually you read each
no, it was nothing constructive about it. It was swear words flying and a lot of not great skills with dealing with that kind of emotion and just letting it fly. But then we would apologize, say we love each other, and be eating McDonald's Sundays half an hour later, and everything was good again. So very loving, though, always together, family dinner every night together as a family, lots of family trips, driving road trips, different places, and a lot of love, a lot of support, very, very loving parents, very incredibly supportive parents.
And what kind of work did they do? Like what did you see? What were you a witness to growing up?
My dad was a real estate broker and property manager for
Uh-huh.
his company that he was vice president of that my grandfather started called Gleiberman Investment Corporation. That's my full last name, not my stage name. And they managed a bunch of properties, like 7 buildings all over LA that the company also owned most of them or a lot of them. And so I would sometimes shout at my dad and go around to the buildings and see what he would do. But I would also work in the office, which is also ironically near where I live now in the Valley, their old office. And my grandfather would have me watch the stock ticker tape for him and tell him how his stocks were doing and give him updates and teach me how to reconcile the balance sheets with good handwriting and stand with good posture, none of which I followed. I have bad posture and I have messy writing, but he at least gave me an entrepreneurial mind, which is good.
Yeah.
And then when my grandfather passed away, the business dissolved and my dad became a luggage salesman, retail salesman, luggage and electronics at Robinson's May, and then a place called Savinar Luggage. My mom growing up a lot of the time initially was back in Israel where she's from. She was a high school teacher and she was an actress, but then she came here, and for a while for many years, she was a housewife and raised us. She was a stay-at-home mom, but she would also tutor students for their bar mitzvahs, and she would tutor rabbi in Bible study and help them write their sermons. Even though she's a totally non-religious person, she has very brilliant, a great understanding of the Bible and of complex things. And so then she became a high school teacher again at an Orthodox Jewish high school, which was the job that fell into her lap, that she had to abide by their no showing your shoulders and no showing your ankle standards. But my mom would disregard that and hug all the students. And I mean, she probably dressed appropriately, but she would hug all the students. I just ran into an ex-student of hers at one of my shows, and he said to me, "Your mom treated us like human beings. Like she related to us. We actually looked forward to talking to her. She'd give the best hugs in the world, and you felt like you actually mattered and weren't just a number to her." And so I grew up with that kind of humanism. My dad is someone who loved to make people laugh, loved to talk to strangers, loved to share stories, loved just to make anyone laugh that he could and regale them with the stories of his life and how proud he was of his family. And so it instilled great family values in me, and it instilled a real gregarious nature. My mom is more the sarcastic, sly, kind of quiet humor and very dry humor. My dad was like the showman with being very outlandish and goofy and doing voices and characters. And I think I ended up being a nice blend of the two.
That's beautiful. And so growing up, were you thinking you'd get into the family business? Like, when you were like the 4-year-old, 5-year-old, what do you want to be when you grow up? Remember what you'd throw out there?
It's been comedian and TV host since day one.
Really?
Since I was
Like,
about 5 or 6.
Amazing.
Never thought I would go into the family business. Never thought I would do that. I knew that I would be an entertainer, and acting became part of it later on. But originally it was stand up and hosting.
And where did that come from? Like, where do you think what was that rooted in?
I think mostly my parents' nature overall. I don't know why I led with the arguments, but we would sometimes get loud and it made me not afraid to speak up, but more so they were just very outgoing, loving, funny people. We would laugh a lot as a family. We would always watch comedy shows as a family. It was an event in our household when George Carlin would drop his yearly specials for HBO, and we would watch them. And he became my complete hero as a comedian and my idol, and who I kind of, if anybody, I pattern myself after. It's a little bit like George Carlin. And, incredibly, I've become friends with his only child, Kelly Carlin, his daughter, who's become an amazing force in my life, and just somebody I really cherish having in my life, and just an amazing human herself. But so
I
it
have to
came
say,
from all of that.
I got to see him live right before he passed. He came to my college in Arizona like a year before. I got to see him in person. Guy is just brilliant. So
Complete
I still
brilliance, yeah. And his last special, I think it was called "It's Bad for You," like a year or so before he died, was his best in many years. He was
That's when I
just
saw
like,
live.
oh, it was incredible, just so incredible. Highly recommend anybody listen to it or watch it that hasn't. And my parents just loved that kind of thing, and they made perhaps an error in parenting, or for my career, the perfect decision. I had a normal bedtime like most kids, but I had a TV in my room and I never had to turn it off. There was no lights out time. So since I was 6, 7, 8 years old, I've been a night owl, going to bed at 12, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., never wanting to get up for school, but I'd be up late watching Saturday Night Live reruns and originals and Kids in the Hall and Letterman, and Johnny Carson was a complete hero and a model that taught me how to host. And I just never had to, and he just passed, so he's been top of mind. Pee-wee's Playhouse taught me how silly and inventive and creative you could be, watching Pee Wee Herman do that, and then Pee Wee's Big Adventure, and Chevy Chase in movies like Fletch and Vacation. And I would just be up all night watching these things. And I never really cared much about Saturday morning cartoons, but I would love the comedies like Saved by the Bell and shows like the ones I just mentioned. And that just shaped how my brain worked. And I think, developed a very adult, advanced sense of humor for a young kid pretty quickly.
And with that, like, so what was the initial, like, the first time you either thought or said, I want to be a comedian? Like, do you remember, like, what had you already been, was it because you were watching stand-up comedy with your family and you loved, like, where did that original, because it sounds like once you had that motivation, then you were all in from the beginning. But what sparked that initial, like, I'm going to do this?
I think just the feedback of making people laugh. I was very good at making my family laugh, like at will, basically, and my friends laugh. And that was with a severe speech problem. I had a very debilitating speech problem through much of my childhood, where I couldn't even talk, where I would stutter and a disfluency, or my vocal cords would close down, plus a little bit of a lisp that I still have a bit of today. And I would have to tell teachers to never call on me, but it would be kind of seasonal. It would come and go, and it would be based on my confidence for myself for some reason, which is why I now can help teach people how to overcome their fear of public speaking. And I do that as a talk or private coaching sometimes too. And because I've really figured out the psychology of it, and I think I can help people through it. I mean, I know I can. And so despite that, in the gaps and the times when I was confident, I would just always make people laugh. I was, despite the speech problem, in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, chosen class comedian in the superlatives. And senior year of high school, I was the person most likely to host the daily talk show, was the one I got. And so it was pretty spot on for what I wanted to do. It was just clear that my talents were not in academics. They were not in athletics. Certainly, I was the funny one on the football team, which is not what you want to do. I ended up with lifelong lower back problems because I was the funny one on the football team, and a couple of the tough guys did not take kindly to that attitude. Yeah, so I just developed that skill and honed it. And I don't know exactly the first time that I thought I could do it, but I just knew in my head I could do it always. Like from a very young age, I used to have dreams of like performing in a sequin jacket on stage. I've since abandoned the sequins dream.
I would say, I mean, you got to have once rocked the sequin.
Oh, I have, definitely. I own a sequin jacket, much like from that dream. I just don't bust it out a lot. It's more for Pride Month that I bust it out rather than for my comedy act, solidarity.
And so what point did you like start honing a craft? Like I know you were obviously telling jokes, like you can do that day to day, but when did you start like really putting an effort into being like a pro at this?
I mean, I really started writing early in high school. I had a box called Ben's Stand-Up Comedy Box, and it was alphabetized, and I would have jokes on bits. And then I started a radio show at the end of high school called the Gleib Show, and even through my speech problem, I would have my friends come and co-host with me, and they would jump in when I would hit a block. And then in college, I immediately started my own late night talk show because I always wanted a Carson-esque, Letterman-esque talk show, called that the Gleib Show, and it became a very big thing on campus. And I would do a handful of episodes a year, including a huge one at the end of the year that culminated in a huge event on our campus. Like the fourth annual live Gleib Show was the official opening ceremonies of UC San Diego's Sun God Festival. There were 3,000 students in the crowd. Carmen Electra was my guest. The year before, the Marines brought me in on a tank down the middle of campus in front of a...
Oh, you went all out with
I went very, very all out. I had helicopters getting shots for me over my movie parodies. This is 96 to 2000. And so I would do a big movie parody for the show each year as well, and make it like a shot-by-shot, elaborate parody, but also remake of like American Beauty became American Booty, and the year that won Best Picture, and the characters were all in college, and so the helicopter was flying over my campus, even though it was a no-fly zone, closed airspace. I did it anyway. I remember being on the phone telling the helicopter, my buddy that was in the helicopter with the pilot. He's like, "We're not allowed to fly over." I'm like, "Just do it. Just fly over quickly, get the shot," and I authorized.
As a pilot, I know that can get you into some serious trouble.
Yes, it can. Yes, it can. But I greenlit it anyway. And I became the station manager of the TV station. So I also learned the inner workings of how to produce TV and what makes a show popular or not, and how to get people motivated to produce.
What were you majoring in, by the way? Because you went to college.
Communications. Yeah. Okay. Communications major, theater minor, graduated in the honors communications thesis program, and had my own class for the last 2 years of college called Gleib Show 198, where my friends could take classes for 4 units and they could work in my production because it was such a big production. But in that, I also had a personal trainer. I had a personal assistant. All they were getting units to, like, it was like kind of Van Wilder-esque, but with less partying, I guess. And then I also had a weekly live call-in show throughout all of college. I did almost every week, called the Whatever Live Show, where I really honed my improv chops. We would take live calls and just try to make them funny and engaging as possible. And that was a real feet to the fire kind of experiment. And so I graduated college from my third annual. I ended up with a manager that was Tom Green and Jimmy Kimmel and Adam Carolla's manager, Howard Lapidus. Back in the day, I graduated with him and Chip Butterman as my managers. I already had them on board for a year waiting for me to graduate. Wow. So I was able to hit the ground running a lot faster than a lot of people can. Came back home when I was 22, and I started dabbling a touch in stand-up like my last year of college, but then joined an improv troupe in LA called the LA Connection during summers during college, actually. Then joined the Empty Stage Theater after I graduated. And I was in that troupe with Kristen Wiig and Felicia Day and these incredible improv geniuses and comedian and comedy geniuses. But I would be in a lot of the improv scenes, and they were so much fun. But I ended up like taking over the scenes a lot. And like, I just had too many comedic ideas and a certain vision how I wanted it to go. Not that my cohorts didn't. And I'm not saying those other two people I just mentioned, they were incredible and we didn't get to do scenes too often together. But I would just sometimes like have my own instincts, and that's not the best for a team improv. And so it was suggested to me by a couple people, maybe stand-up's the better avenue for you, where it's just your words and your decisions and your calls. And so I shifted more into stand-up while also acting training the whole time at some of the best acting schools in LA, and stand-up's what really started to take off for me, and that led to hosting, which really took off for me as well. So hosting and stand-up are the two things that I became most known for.
And so at what point?
And lovemaking also. I don't want to shortchange my lovemaking skills. I'm very well known for that.
In terms of like, if you're tiering it, where does that sit?
I mean, it's its own echelon, really. It's way below, but in my mind, it's medium.
In medium, okay.
Medium echelon.
Medium echelon. And in the other two, stand-up, acting?
I guess way above. I mean, I'm definitely more naturally talented of those two, at least. If you ask my first encounters and my very late blooming nature, it was definitely the other two that came a little more natural, and which led to the lovemaking too. I sadly, I don't know that I have much game in this world if somebody hasn't seen me perform first. If someone's coming in cold,
Work with what you got.
work with what you got. You know, I'm not the world's most good looking guy. I'm not the world's most in shape, even though I'm working on both of those. My face is being reshapen daily, and I'm losing weight at a rapid rate. But you go with what you got, and it
That's why
seemed
you got
to
the sequin jacket.
correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
perfect.
There are dudes
So,
jumping all over me.
so when was the point that, I mean, was it getting management out of school? Like, it sounds like even in college, you felt like you were crushing it in college doing this stuff. So, like, at what point did you go like, oh, this is coming true? Like, I'm going to make a career out of this. Because I know, like, in comedy, like, it's hard. It's one of the hardest vocations out there. You're getting judged by a giant room of people several times a night, a lot of the time. You're even if the greats get booed off the stage. Like it's crazy how hard it is. And there's no point where you're like you get to kind of rest on your laurels. Never exists. But at what point were you like, oh wait, I'm not like the dreams I've had since a little kid. Like I'm going to make this work. Like I can make a living doing this. Like when did that hit?
It was a specific moment. I remember it clearly. It was the end of my freshman year of college at UCSD. And when I did the first annual live Gleib show, it was just in my little college first at Muir College outdoors. And I had run 100-foot audio video cables down the sides of the residence halls from the TV station into our cameras. And this elaborate production, I spent weeks not sleeping, organizing and writing and trying to book amazing guests and making it this very unique show that my parents drove up for and my grandma drove up for. And it started to rain before the show began. It started to like drizzle, and we had like thousands of dollars of equipment outside and not covered. And if it was going to rain any little bit more, they were going to have to call out the show. So I did a very rare prayer. I went in the corner and I prayed that it would stop raining, and it did stop raining. And the show went off without a hitch, and it was just it executed exactly as I saw it in my brain. The crowd was just kind of in the palm of my hand for the whole hour and a half, laughing where I wanted them to laugh. Every bit was received as I hoped. And I remember walking down the residence hall after that show, after we'd wrapped up all the equipment and everybody left. And I said to myself, I could make a career out of this. I can do it.
That's awesome. And then from there, I mean, how consistent has it been in terms of, I'm sure you've had moments, weeks, months where it feels like, this is a little shaky. Like I think every entrepreneur, everyone in their career has that. But like from an annual basis, has it been pretty consistent that you're like, I can, like, this is still working? Or have you had points where it felt like you might have to make a switch or get out of this? I mean, as we've all seen, we've had friends in the entertainment world that all of a sudden they're real estate agents and things like that.
Uh-huh.
Like, that ever knocked on your door?
Yeah. Thankfully, it has not in any significant way. Like you said, definitely like little moments and insecurities. And if you asked my psyche, I would say often I feel like it's not going how I want it to. And when you see, when I see all of my cohorts that I literally came up with, like my comedy class, that, I mean, granted, I'm in very fortunately probably in the top 5% of the people I came up with as far as success, I would guess, and the things I've been fortunate enough to be able to do. But this business really only pays the real money and the real following for the top like 2%. And so I'm still not quite, and I'm seeing my friends literally headlining arenas night after night and making probably $50 million a year just in stand-up, 30 to 50 million, and starring and creating in their own Netflix scripted shows and being on the cover of Variety and having multiple Netflix specials and millions of fans that I haven't yet reached. And you question whether you're going to get there a little bit. So I would say it's almost more lately a little bit in the last 5 years, because I've always known that I could make it in this business, but whether I'm going to be able to make it to the very, very top, speaking of echelons, am I going to be able to make it to that super stardom level where I really get to entertain and bring laughter and joy to the masses, to millions of people consistently on my own terms, on my own platform, and be able to hopefully reap the financial rewards of that as well, is still a question mark to some degree. I don't like to acknowledge that it's a question mark, but you asked the question. And so I think that is something that I still I'm too hard on myself sometimes, because then a comedian that doesn't have the things that I do or haven't, been able to achieve the things I have, say to me like, are you kidding? How many people would trade places with you in a moment? And I think to some degree you probably need that bit of self-doubt to keep your engine going, to keep yourself motivated. Otherwise you would just rest on your laurels. And I'm like, wow, I got a big pool and I got a great view out of the back of my how? So why do I want to keep working? I've got what I need. It's just, I guess, something in me that wants to climb to the very top. It's,
It,
like I said, I'm not much of an athlete, so I'm not going to climb to the very top of Everest, but I'm going to climb hopefully the very top of the Everest of the comedy world and of the entertainment business. And so, but generally on an annual basis, I've been very lucky with rare exception. Maybe there's 2 or 3 years of the last 20 that like maybe my income dropped significantly or I didn't know exactly where my next job would come from. And one of those was pretty recently. I mean, there was pandemics and businesses shut down. That's when I actually reinvented and pivoted and turned it into a great positive. But with every pivot comes what you leave behind. And, I just when the pandemic hit, I lost my stand-up touring agent at WME during the pandemic. And so instead of I cobbled together my own tour that next year and then didn't want to keep doing that. And I thought I'm just going to double down on digital and auditions and stuff here in LA and developing my material here. And for the first time in 15 years of being a road traveling, headlining, touring comedian, I've just been performing in LA and doing digital stuff with my Nowhere comedy brand I created and around town. And in that time, it's been really wonderful. And I just trusted that leap would not be a detriment. And I just, I recorded my 2nd-hour special and released it, and it was to great critical fanfare. In fact, Kelly Carlin actually compared it to George Carlin on her Sirius radio show and tweeted on the official George Carlin Twitter that people need to check out my special, The Mad King, because it reminds her of her dad's approach to comedy, which literally put tears in my eyes and was enough to motivate me for another year. And then I just debuted my new hour called Endings, about this very crazy personal year I've had with a lot of endings in it, and trying to craft that into what I think will be my 3rd-hour special that I'll hopefully tape in the next few months. But generally, income-wise, every year I find a way to, the graph definitely goes up. There are a couple dips, but it goes up every year. Except, to be fair, when I had my own game show on Game Show Network that then went to Netflix, Idiot Test, and I was the star of a TV network, that income year was the pinnacle. And I'm trying to get back to that and above, but if you take out the outlier, like last 2 seasons of that show, it's definitely an upward trend. But once you get that TV money, you definitely want to get back there.
No, and so a lot to unpack there.
Sorry, that was quite a
good. I appreciate
journey.
it. No, so to start, like I gotta imagine getting off the road. I remember watching some clip with Tom Segura and Bert Kreischer about like they're joking about how miserable it is on the road, and they're like laughing, and then they both just start crying. And like, I gotta imagine getting off the road and being able to do what you do, but not be all on an airplane every single day in a new city where you're waking up like, where the fuck am I? Like, I gotta imagine that's nice for the psyche, at least a little bit this many years into it.
Very much. It's been really grounding. It's been really wonderful. And especially, I lost my father just 3.5 months ago, I guess approaching 4 months ago now. And I was home a lot more than I normally would be and got to have weekly dinners with my parents practically weekly for the last couple of years, which was amazing. And that was amazing. But it's good for the psyche, but it's also a little tough on the psyche because I knew that I was taking a gamble. And I think my stand-up profile has probably taken a hit while I've built up in other areas. Now I've become like one of the lead anchors of the Young Turks, and I get to bring my comedic spin to their shows and to my own video series I do for them under their Rebel Headquarters banner, and my social media is doing well, and some videos go viral and you get in the millions of views and you feel great, but the average of them don't do that. And I'm seeing exactly the guys you mentioned, for example, Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura, like they've been buddies for a long time. Tom and Christina and I did some like horrible little web series, like as guests on some, not horrible, but like just like the most low budget, tiny thing. Many, many moons ago, we were on there with some porn star and with some random guy selling, I don't know what vitamins. It was like, you know what I mean? And then Tom's at the top of the game, and Bert and I literally were on a tour in probably the year was like 2004, 2005, called Virtual Comedy Heroes with me, him, and Eddie Ift. And we played like 3 cities all over Georgia. And one night we had to play the Athens Theater. They had booked for us. It was 600 seats. And we showed up 2 hours before the show, and there were 6 tickets sold. And so Bert and I and Eddie went to local Kinko's at the time and printed a bunch of flyers, and we're hawking for our own shows while we were the Virtual Comedy Heroes. And we're just begging people to come in, and we were able to get it to like 60 people in those 2 hours. And we still had a very empty theater, but at least it wasn't horrifically empty, and we were able to do a great show. As long as the shows are good, you still feel good about what you do. You just don't maybe feel good about the way you're resonating deeply into the psyche of a very overly saturated entertainment market, especially these days. But then, it just definitely gives you motivation, and also a little bit of a like, what am I doing wrong? To then see Bert headlining arenas and the cover of Variety. And I just ran into him, and he was so sweet and kind, and said he might have me come do some like NASCAR dates with him or something. And that would be amazing. But you just wonder, what you need to do to get to that level. It's very motivating, and it also is very concerning. And I don't sleep a lot. No, I do. I sleep just fine.
The good news is we live in a world where there's always someone bigger. Like, I'm sure Bert's saying the same thing about, the greats, so to speak, and maybe he'll end up there. But like, there's always someone doing something bigger and better than you. Elon Musk is looking at Mark Zuckerberg in terms of like at the pinnacle of their careers, where they now
and he wants to kick his ass in a cage match and then make up stuff about. But after my surgery, yes, that's when I'll do it. Is after I build muscles and have them put surgically into my body. Yes.
I gotta hand it to Mark Zuckerberg. He posted a picture and he's like shredded now. So it's like, you really like, he actually looks like he's been training for a while.
Damn. Okay. Yeah. I know he's been doing jujitsu and stuff. And then Bert, to your exact point, during the pandemic, I was asked to be part of Laugh Aid, which Comedy Gives Back did. It's an organization that supports comedians who are in need, either psychologically or financially. And they put together like some of the biggest stars in comedy. And I was so honored to be asked to be on it. And Bert was on it. He hosted one of the hours with Whitney Cummings, and they had Adam Sandler on, and Bert was just losing his shit with Adam Sandler. And he like looked like a child. Like, I was like, Bert, why are you not also being funny here and like looking like you belong? He was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Another thing, you don't understand, like your movie, and I do it. And it was like, Bert, take a breath, so.
Yeah, that's exactly how it works. So to rewind a little ways, you start doing stand-up and hosting, like, it sounds like just post the improv side, you decide to focus on that. What was your first hosting?
First TV hosting gig?
Well, you mentioned hosting, so if you mean
yeah, gosh, I guess first hosting was probably on the internet. I hosted like some web series briefly called Is It Manly? I hosted things for MySpace, hired me in their last efforts to become relevant again when they tried to rebranding maybe like 15 or so years ago. Well, my first hosting thing was I pitched myself to be the news bureau chief of National Lampoon Network, which was a college TV network aired to colleges around the country. And I was the news bureau chief, and I would do like these little one-off reports. And after a few months, Randy Siegel was very instrumental in getting me in there. She was Fallon's old manager and a great executive. She was VP of National Lampoon at the time, brought me into the president, Dan Lakin's office, and said, this guy needs his own show. I had my late night talk show pitch ready to go, pitched it, sold it, and for 3 seasons hosted the Gleib show on National Lampoon, which I had done in college. Then I started doing. But then I guess my first like professional, and then by hosting, what I really mean is hosting or chorus or like panel stuff. So being on air, kind of riffing and as an on air personality. So then I was hired.
I was going to say, when did that really start to kick off?
So I had done a few things here and there. I can't remember at the moment even what my first one really was. Like Game Show Network had me guest host on their like Saturday morning game show hours blocks. You'd play games live with the audience as they watched other shows during like commercial bumpers. I forget what it was even called. It was called GSN Live. And then it was many years before I worked with them again, but they kept their eyes on me, thank God. And then I did some things on CNN and during the 2012 presidential election. But I guess in
real quick on the CNN thing, what did they call you in? Were they literally like, we're talking about the election, we're here with comedian Ben Gleib?
Yeah, I would go on with like Don Lemon mostly, and I would do a comedic spin. They call it the lighter side of politics, and I would do a comedic spin on politics, on the presidential campaigns. And yeah, absolutely they could. You got to bring Don Lemon back first.
Yeah, touche.
And I then auditioned for this show for NBC called The Real Wedding Crashers in 2007. Well, 2006, I sold my own show to Fox with Lorne Michaels as the producer and production company, Broadway Video, called The Gleib Show again. It was going to be the show at Lampoon evolved from a talk show to like a single camera sitcom that wrapped around all the different segments like Hidden Camera and Man on the Street and sketches in a very innovative format. Lorne's company loved it. We sold it to Fox with them. I'm still on Lorne Michaels' IMDb, which is amazing because I'm pretty certain he does not know who I am.
Lorne didn't Lorne Michaels and National Lampoon have like a big like dispute and like conflict
Did
because of
they?
what
Oh,
happened?
yeah, because I think Lorne used to own Burly Bear Network that became National Lampoon Network, and there was some sort of
And I
something.
thought like because he was like because SNL wasn't Lampoon, and I thought he was like poaching a bunch of people from Lampoon to SNL, which
There
I thought
was
was part
that
of
for
it.
sure.
I don't. I'm
Yes.
not in the industry. I don't know as much, but I think I heard.
There was some of that, yeah, and a lot of
Yeah,
the Harvard Lampoon guys, which were tangentially related to the National Lampoon, then came.
yeah,
It was Chevy Chase and Aykroyd, I believe, and
exactly.
a
Yeah,
lot of those guys that
yeah,
went over there. So yeah, there was something there. I don't think he really knew about the connection with me there,
yeah.
hopefully. But and that show went away. The comedy department that bought it at Fox was fired by the time our deal closed and our script was finished. So we got paid to write it, but never got to make it, even though we were supposed to. And then,
Which that happens
just
a
through
lot, right? Just for people
a
that don't know
lot
the industry, a lot.
all the time. You'll
Yeah,
have your dream come true. That's why I'm trying to make moves in recent years to take the power back myself and give myself opportunities and create my own platforms where it can't ever be taken away from me, because I'm just, 2 decades deep, pretty sick of like getting your big break. And then the big break, if in a huge success, lasts 2 or 3 years, and then more often gets on the air for a minute or gets a pilot and never gets picked up. And then it's just
yeah,
short-term work and you kind of start from scratch. You're known a little
yeah.
bit more in
On
the
that
business.
note, I think I might have lost you.
Well, I
But
just want to say one more thing. So then I started hosting my own show and producing my own show at the Laugh Factory, Gleib's College Comedy, that then became Comedy Juice. I created my own brand of live comedy events I took to the Improv, which effectively got me banned from the Laugh Factory for like 10 years. But you got to do what you got to do.
they were pissed. You went to the Improv and
They
said,
were
"Don't
just
come back
pissed.
here."
Yeah, but they were offering me real money as opposed to no money. Basically, I was getting paid like beans there at the factory, and it's gotten better. Now they pay great. And I'd love to keep playing there. And please don't be listening to this podcast. But you're always in comedy. It's the most humbling business because you're always, no matter how successful you become, you still are beholden to all of the comedy club gatekeepers and the bookers and the owners and needing to do every gig. Like I'll come off of an NBC shoot that I'm doing for 2 months and the star of an NBC show, and then happily go play for $60 a gig in Pacoima where I get to practice 40 minutes of stand up instead of 15 minutes in town. And so I started doing that show. I ended up selling that brand years later after building it up for 15 years. I sold Comedy Juice, but I was hosting my own show that became the hottest show in town. And so that led to my stand-up debut on TV, because the booker of the Late Late Show with Craig Kilborn at the time, which before Ferguson and Corden came along, would put his comics on my show before their appearances every week to run their 5 minutes, and he would see me killing it. So then he offered me to appear on the Late Late Show one time. So I got to do that. And then I'm just doing my show at the Improv, and all these people are seeing it. And Chelsea Handler, I'd booked a couple of times on my show and got to know her a little tiny bit. And she liked my voice and liked my vibe, and brought me in when she got Chelsea Lately to audition to be the announcer of the show. Didn't get that gig, but I was like, I'd love to come do this roundtable you guys are apparently going to be doing. They're like, yeah, we'd love to. Manager at the time stupidly waited 7 months before calling them to get me in on the very ground floor. But eventually I reminded him and he called. I became a regular on Chelsea Lately for the next 7 years and did over 100 episodes. And that's the show that really gave me a name in this business, made me a known entity, made me recognizable out in the streets. And I owe so much of that to the booker, Michael Cox, who's now the booker of The Tonight Show, and to Chelsea Handler for believing in me that whole time. And so when Chelsea
And
Lately
you
ended up,
delivering. I mean, you get in the door through some favors maybe, but you get invited back 100 times. I think you probably did something right.
that is true. That is definitely true. Plus, a lot of sexual favors. And I won't say who I gave them to and who
Again,
gave them
whatever.
to me, or if that even happened. That didn't happen. I'd like to clarify the record. These days, say something
Yeah,
like that, and
exactly.
all of a
This
sudden
is
there's a
off the record.
headline. Yes, this whole podcast is off the record, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Uh,
Deep background. And then just to complete the picture briefly, the NBC thing I mentioned, 2006, it was called The Real Wedding Crashers. I auditioned for this thing. It's just like a hidden camera actor, got cast as one of the leads in this 5-person cast of this Ashton Kutcher, Jason Goldberg produced, the guys that made Punk'd, primetime NBC hidden camera show. We'd crash real life weddings with the bride and groom in on it with us. $1 million budgets each episode, insane high pressure environment. Did that show. It's going to be the big break. It was going to air in primetime after Heroes on NBC, and then it failed very quickly. And the rest of the cast, it's all gone on to amazing things. The 5 of us have all developed incredible careers. I'm the only one that believed the show was going to be a big hit. And they were all like, I heard a publicist, they're like, Ben, don't waste your money. The show's not very good. But it was Catherine Reitman who ended up creating and starring in and writing, I think directing a lot of Working Moms on Netflix, the huge hit, one of the biggest shows in the world. Desi Lydic, who's now one of the star correspondents on The Daily Show. Gareth Reynolds of the Dollop podcast. And Steve Byrne, who's become one of the biggest comics in the world and had his own sitcom for years. And so the five of us did pretty good. But then Chelsea Lately for 7 years. And right when Chelsea announced that show was going off the air, there was like a run up of like the last year. We knew it was coming to a close. Game Show Network called me back in and offered me my own game show. And I shot the whole first season before Chelsea Lately ended. And so literally 2 weeks to the day after the final episode of Chelsea Lately, my game show premiered. And so I was, or maybe it might have even been 2 weeks before, I can't remember, but basically I was never off the air, very luckily. And I told Game Show Network, take ads out on the finale weeks of Chelsea Lately, because that's where my fans are. They're going to come over. And they did. That's
awesome.
That.
And so how long did the Game Show Network stuff?
I did it for 4 seasons, 210 episodes. Wow. I was the host, head writer, became co-executive producer.
Wow. You were literally, that's more than an episode.
Yeah, well.
For 4 years, 52
It was 4 years. So it was 20 weeks. But they basically, had an episode a week for 4 years. And they ran, and we would block shoot those puppies. I would shoot 5 episodes a day. So that was pretty wild, but I got a lot of energy. So I was happy to do it. And I was still free the rest of my year to audition for other things and pursue other things. And then you get your own frustrations with the business side of it too, because, since this is more, about the struggle and the, just to speak honestly, like I should have been more focused on having another show ready to go during that time, because I was able to do any other show in first position during Idiot Test. But also my team at the time really dropped the ball and did not set me up on anything right after. So that's when that first like real scary moment happened. When I was at this pinnacle point, I was the star of a network. I was the face of their Christmas commercial campaigns. It was a holiday filled with Gleib. I'm on the side of buildings. And the show gets canceled because the network changes directions completely. And all of a sudden I'm not on TV for a few years. And I had to scramble and figure some things out.
And what year was that?
It ended 2018. It stopped airing.
And so what'd you do like pre-COVID? So 18, 19, beginning of 20, what were you working on? Was it back to stand up? Like what was your focus during that period?
Back to stand up, touring, auditioning. And then I don't know if you even know about this big turn, but my life took a quite significant turn in 2019. And if you don't know about it, it proves the exact point of how broken our media and our politics are. But I I'm very into politics, and I'd also been on NPR along this time for 7 years and really knew my politics. And I was on CNN, like I said, in my podcast that I started, that was on Kevin Smith's network, was a very, very popular podcast. I haven't done it recently consistently, so it's dropped off a bit, and it talked about news and politics. And I was seeing Donald Trump as a huge existential threat to our country. I mean, I still see it that way. And he was running for re-election in 2019 for the 2020 election. And I was watching the early debates, and I didn't think that traditional politicians were going to beat him. And I thought, you can't beat a heckler like him with polite politics. You need a comedian to beat a heckler. And so I threw my hat in the ring and ran for president of the United States.
I actually did not know that.
You did not? Yeah. I mean, it was here you can see, here's the propaganda poster, one of our propaganda posters from the campaign right there. Nice. Sometimes you got to take their toys away. This is the cover of the Nashua Telegraph in New Hampshire. Comedian Ben Gleib, campaigns for presidency. We were out there for 7 months on the campaign trail, speaking at events with everyone, with Biden and Warren and Buttigieg and Sanders and every major candidate and Larry King.
I had lunch with Andrew Yang today. He was on the podcast.
Really? Yeah. Really? Amazing. That's cool. He was so cool to me during the campaign and did videos. He's like, Gleib gang, it's the Yang gang here. And he was very cool. And Larry King interviewed me, and we really made some inroads, considering the media wanted to give us, as did the DNC, wanted to give us literally zero attention because we weren't already a billionaire, which money speaks in this world like crazy, and we weren't from inside the political system. And if you're not one of those two, they just do not want to risk having outside voices on. And so there were moments of little things. The Washington Post did a video for their website, and Now This did a video on my campaign, and like I said, Larry King. But overall, we couldn't get in the New York Times. We couldn't get in the LA Times. We couldn't get on CNN, where I used to be. And I would message Don Lemon. He's like, I don't think this is going to work. Our producers say for our show. It's like, what do you mean? A candidate in the race for the existential crisis of our nation? And I'm presenting another option. It's not worth 5 minutes. You'd rather for 24 hours a day have your experts go on and just bloviate on and on, show 10 seconds of the actual news clip and the rest of them just pontificating about what it means, but you can't actually share the news of another candidate in the race? Silly. And Joe Rogan, even, I was very disappointed by, and I speak pretty openly about this because he and I got into a big argument about it because I asked him to have me on and he just was not cool about it. And said no, but in an aggressive way as well. And then would kind of make jokes about my campaign on his show, which ironically was great exposure. But, even though he was not saying necessarily positive things. And then 6 months later, after my campaign ends, he's on his podcast saying, what we need to beat Trump is a comedian. That's what we need. Like he thought of the idea when literally it was my premise that I brought to him. And then, of course, the war in Ukraine broke out, and anybody who didn't think a comedian could be taken seriously as president all of a sudden sees Zelensky, who's the hero of the world and considered the best leader ever, who was just before he became president, the most famous comedian in the country and a very silly improv guy and touring the country doing playing the piano with his penis. There
you go. There's still rounds to be had, though. Every 4 years you can go for it.
Yeah, I'm pretty out of that. I've decided that it is not for me. Never say never. Perhaps when I'm 1,000 years old and I'm in the prime age for politics, then maybe. But until that time, I'm good.
All right. So you did the campaign trail thing until, up until the beginning of COVID. You made some pivots. I remember you hosted an event with us. Now you've got your digital side. So bring me up to speed now. Where's the career at? What's going on right now for you? You mentioned a little bit.
Yeah. So then the pandemic hits, and as much as it was difficult for everybody to have 2 years of not normal life, not normal career, it was extra crazy for me because it was 3 years because I was on the campaign trail for most of the year before. And I was that was one of the very low financial places. I was near broke. I owned my home, so I was okay, but I was very cash flow poor and didn't know where my next income was really going to come from because I was off the road and the road was closed and clubs were closed everywhere. And so I just closed my eyes for a second and out of, as they say, desperation is the mother of invention. I just thought, there's got to be a way to tour without touring, without leaving the house. And I realized, this is how you do it. It's just if you could just let people on a video conferencing platform have their mics and cameras on, unlike the first people that were doing it, which were so afraid of noise that would mess up shows, making them mute themselves, then it wasn't at all like stand-up. If you could make it very close to stand-up and manage the audio so that the audio levels would be comparable to a performer and an audience, the dynamic of the microphone being louder, and bring their audio levels down and have live showroom managers that would manage it and bouncers that would mute people and kick people out and provide customer service and ticket sales. And we all of a sudden could tour without leaving our homes. And I created Nowhere Comedy. I brought the idea to Steve Hofstetter, who was my co-founder at the time, and we built this business. And before you know it, we had multiple New York Times profiles and Forbes and Fast Company talking about us, and we were called by the Interrobank, which is this comedy insider newsletter that's very respected, called the #3 innovator that changed comedy in 2020. And we had millions of dollars in revenue through the door and 700 shows from up-and-comers to Bill Burr and Sarah Silverman and the Sklar brothers and Birbiglia did 28 shows with us. And we built a studio in my home that was COVID compliant. And Burr and Sarah would come and perform here in my house and do these big shows. And it was an avenue for me to be able to do shows. And I created this very dedicated online following and found my most hardcore fans I've ever had. So it's been a smaller number of people than I would perform to typically, but they're the most dedicated following. And I created this show called Gleib Off the Top, which is this weird virtual show I do monthly. And they call me the Mad King of this town called Mad Town, where the show takes place, this virtual fictional town. And all of my followers are called the Mad Ones. And they're the most dedicated, amazing people. And I had a Patreon start to pick up from that. And they would get tickets to all my virtual shows. And I would do another online, originally 6 days a week during the pandemic. Now we just do it monthly with Jodie Sweetin and Chris Bowers and Rachel Gallagher. And I do this online talk show and I headline my stand-up virtually as well as developing it in town. And the Mad Ones and the Mad King stuff led to I got an offer to do my second hour special from Helium Comedy Studios. And I went to Philly. People were still wearing masks in the crowd, but it was pretty much post the thick of it, and recorded it and released that, and then auditioned virtually via Zoom, via tape, and then via Zoom for a Disney show called Just Beyond, and was cast in my biggest acting role ever to be a ghost in the series called Just Beyond. And I went and shot that in Atlanta during COVID, and with intense COVID protocols, wearing masks with a lot of face makeup, which was very frustrating because they would have to retouch our makeup constantly. They eventually let the cast not wear masks much, which was a much better decision because we're better than everybody else. We're act. And then just doing more stand up and building stuff up again, and trying to kind of find that next thing that's going to be my big next foray. And I've got a big plan for it. Part of it is finding somebody to run Nowhere Comedy for me, which we are already transitioning into Nowhere Studios. I realized during the strike, all of these studios that are being lambasted for being so greedy and not respecting talent at all, and the writers and the actors that make their content, well, I can start a smaller version of that with, very talent-centered deals and talent-focused things that truly appreciate the artistry of who creates the art. And we're going to be doing all kinds of shows of trying to find a team that kind of take a lot of that off my shoulders, because I have a very big show that's going to kind of bring my life and career full circle. I don't want to talk about it right now, but it's an innovative thing that kind of spins on an old format and reinvents it for the social media age. And I'm going to be at the helm of it, hosting this show and writing it. And hopefully it's a show that I think could pop off. And we're going to be actually funding it soon and taking on investors and trying to go really big in a thing that we control, and that we're going to give some amount of ownership in it to the audience, I think, as well. And we're going to try to basically take on some of these network shows in a very homegrown way, in a way that we control. And it's a job I'd love to keep for the next 30 years and be able to just supplement it with touring. And so that's kind of the plan right now. But when the big auditions come along, when the strike eventually hopefully ends and we get a fair deal, I'll probably still be doing some of those auditions too,
Yeah. And so last question for you, you've been able, since, as you said, 5, 6 years old, you had a vision and you were able to execute. You've been able to spend all these years, what would that be? How old are you now? Early 40s?
Thank you so much. I'm 27. I am 45 years old. Just turned 45 last month.
There you go. So, you've spent the past 40 years, really pursuing this and making it work. What would be your advice to someone that has their dream, that wants to advice you either wish you got or you did get, that helped you get through the tough times, that helped you keep going? Like, what would be one thing you would advise someone else trying?
A couple fold would be the advice. Firstly, I would say, do not pursue this. I would say you really don't want to do it. It's a mistake. It's not as easy as you think. You are most likely going to fail. It'll be a lifelong slog of turning what you love into work, which makes it a grind, which takes away the ability for it to be the passion you want it to be. And it's better if you just keep it as a hobby or something you enjoy watching, and do not do it. And now that I've hopefully weeded out most of the people that want to do it for vanity reasons or don't really truly want to do it, if you still want to do it in the face of that, just know that it is a long journey. When I met Jim Carrey when I was in college and knowing I wanted to pursue all this already, and I said to him, I'm an aspiring comedian and actor, wonder if you have any advice for me. And he goes, best of luck to you. Expect it to take 20 years. And at the time, I thought that was kind of dickish advice. And then, now 24 years, 23 years into doing it professionally, he's very right. And so stick with it. And the best, most tangible advice also that I still need help following, that I hopefully with this new project will be following. And if anybody wants in on it, by the way, DMs are open. Whatever's working best for you, focus on it. Craig Robinson gave me that advice years and years ago, and I still don't really follow it, and it's to my detriment. Don't try to do it all now. Whatever you're getting traction with, focus on that, ride that wave, climb to the top, then you can diversify and do all the other things that your heart desires, but ride the wave and let the market also tell you what you're best at, and ride that all the way up.
Great advice. Love it, Ben. Well, thank you so much for coming on HawkeTalk. It's been awesome.
It's my pleasure. And if I could just also say one other thing, if anybody else wants direct advice, I've also started this kind of side hustle, I guess, recently, where I am coaching people not just in their public speaking. I'm helping people rewrite and shape the humor and the impact of their TED Talks, their lectures, their business pitches, their wedding speeches.
Smart.
I'm doing all of that stuff. So if anybody wants help with that, I'm doing some kind of consulting and writing on the side for that kind of thing too. And it's just at Ben Gleib on Instagram is like text to me. So you can hit me anytime.
Perfect. And I got to imagine that's helpful if anyone's trying to deliver a message, have a comedian that lives or dies by the delivery. So
it's been insane. I didn't expect to even do this, but all of a sudden the money pouring in's been really good. So I'm making some time for it. That is true. I'm getting slightly smarter in my middle age to young, very young. But so far, I've only had 3 clients doing this. One, we're still shaping the speech. The first 2 clients, both standing ovation. So just saying.
There you go. Perfect.
I'm very young though, right? You can acknowledge I'm very young.
27. Yeah.
I'm on 27. And a lot of people say I'm going backwards, kind of a Benjamin Button vibe. I look better every time they see me.
The face work, the body work you're doing. Like
a lot of massages, a lot of injections, a lot of whatever's out there that I disagree with morally, I do it physically.
Perfect. Do what you say, not what you do, right?
100%.
Okay, thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Eric.